Hi, shalom friends. You know, every rule has an exception. Usually we tell the children and certainly the adults, when you come into a synagogue, a shul, you should be respectful, no running around, whisper, don't shout, and so on. What's the exception? Purim. Purim, we actually encourage people to make noise. Whenever they read the story of Esther and they hear the name of the wicked fiend, Haman, make noise, boo him. And then more often than not, it's followed by a party. It's not like on Shabbat, when you come upstairs, it's a nice, beautifully set table, but it's quiet. Usually when you walk into a Purim party, the music is blaring, people are shouting. In short, there's a lot of noise on Purim. And I was thinking, of what benefit is there in having a lot of noise? Here's a story that happened. It's almost going to sound like a fairy tale, except it actually happened a little bit more than 70 years ago. Let me take you back to 1948. As you probably know, the British are about to leave the land of Israel, and the Arab population are openly declaring a jihad. They're going to just kill whoever's left. And of course, the War of Independence is shortly going to begin. Now, let's focus on northern Israel, because southern Israel had much more population. Northern Israel, the mystical city of Tzfat had approximately 1,500 Jews in 1948. There were over 12,000 Arabs living in Tzfat, and if we look at the surrounding area, maybe another 40,000. So the odds of 1,500 Jews against such overwhelming numbers does not look very good. In addition to which, of the 1,500 Jews, perhaps maybe 200 of them were of the age where they could fight. Most of them were elderly. Well, the British were gentlemen, so they leave Tzfat in April, a little bit of a month before, and they tell the Jewish population, we're going, there's going to be a bloodbath, but we'll provide trucks for you, and we could truck you to wherever you want. But these 1,500 Jews in Tzfat are stubborn. No, we're going to stay. Well, at that time, there was the Haganah. There was also other independent forces that worked in conjunction with the Irgun, the Palmach, and the Irgun and the Palmach, they were able to spare another 130 fighters. Wow! Now the odds are what? It's the same odds. Thousands and thousands against so few. To complicate everything, there was hardly any weapons to fight with. So, in the beginning of May, the Jewish fighters are planning something. What are we going to do? To fight a defensive war? It's going to be too late. What we should do is do a surprise attack. And at that time, as I mentioned earlier, the Arabs were 10,000 in the city of Tzfat. They actually had the police station and something called the Citadel. And what happened was on May 6th, Arab forces began to shell the Jewish quarter. And they were shelling it from Mount Meron. So I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It was actually on May 6th that the Arabs started first. And on May 10th, the Jewish people decided in Tzfat, all close to 2,000, that they have to fight and originate an attack. What did they have? Well, they had a cannon. It was made by a guy called David Leibkowitz. And he created some type of a cannon. It was remarkably imprecise. Not only that, it had a 3-inch gun. You could load it with 3 inches of ammunition, but they had no gunpowder. So they would fill the casing with nails, some sawdust, anything to fill it. But what it did have was a tremendous noise. They called it Davidka. They said, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take our Davidka, named after David, and we're going to fire it at the police station. So they positioned it in the courtyard of one of the synagogues in Safat, and they begin firing the Davidka. Anyway, how much damage it did, people are speculating, very little, but the noise was deafening. And the Arabs had never heard anything like that. After the barrage, it was quiet. That night, over 10,000 Arab inhabitants fled. The next day, there was no war. Safat was abandoned. What had happened? Of course, it would be nice to say the truth, which is it was a miracle. But every miracle that has happened, especially in recent times, usually has some type of a hold in nature. So this is what happened. The Arabs were wondering, how is it possible that the Jews in Safat, so hopelessly outnumbered, are not leaving? So they whispered amongst themselves, they must have some type of a secret weapon. Sure enough, this Davidka made so much noise, they had never heard anything. It was like a Horowitzer, like what? They said, this is a secret weapon. And it kept on firing, making this tremendous noise. Shortly after the bombardment, a very fine mist, like a very light rain, began to fall. They were so superstitious. They said, this is a secret weapon. It might be nuclear. This is nuclear fallout. And they actually ran away in fright. And I'm going to quote now. In recognition of the importance of the Davidka in the liberation of Safat, the Davidka monument was installed on the 29th of April, 1956. And every year there's a memorial ceremony in front of the Davidka cannon in Sfat when the city honors its dead and a wreath is laid on the cannon itself. So it's a fascinating part of history. What scared the enemy? I just said, noise. I think that's what Purim is all about. There's different ways where we have to deal with the enemy within, the evil within, the apathy. And sometimes we could talk to it and try to explain to ourselves why we should be more motivated and why it's so exhilarating to do what's right and why we should not be lazy. And then there are times we just got to shout, wake up! Just like that. Pick yourself up. Do something. Run. Get excited. That's Purim. Purim is an exciting holiday. A lot of noise. And what are we making noise? We make noise because we don't want to hear anything of Haman. We don't want to hear sad reports. We don't want to hear logical inferences. You got to give up. You're outnumbered. You'll never make it. You're too weak. You're unsophisticated. The world is against you. Just shout it out. Shout it out. And when we shout it out, to a certain extent, it's really effective. So, lift your glasses and say L'chaim. Raise your voice and shout, Am Yisrael Chai, we live forever.